Hey there, it's Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you my December wrap up. It was the last reading month of the year and I read 10 books and I'm here to tell you all about them. I had a theme for the month of December. It's quite an obvious theme which I'm sure you'll be able to guess by the end of it, and check out the description box below for content warnings on all of the books. Now let's get right down to the books. So the first book I'm going to be talking about is an audiobook that I listened to mix things up for once, and that's In A Holidaze by Christina Lauren. I really had such a good time with this book, and it was my first Christina Lauren read. So this book is set during the days running up until Christmas, and we're following a group of friends who always come together, their parents, their children, so they're all there in one big house, and our main character has a crush on one of the friends who always visits, and she goes through a day and it kind of all goes wrong and things happen that she's not very happy with, and then at the end of the day she dies and wakes up on the same day, and she keeps getting a do-over for the day, which she thinks is going to keep happening until she does things right. And that is the premise for the story, a bit of a Groundhog Day kind of re-continuing time loop, and it was so much fun. I actually love time loop stories, but I think they can be very difficult to do because they often can fall into the square of being a bit too repetitive, but I don't think this one fell into that at all. Although it does repeat several times over, it kind of changes the day enough that it all feels different, and it also focuses on different parts of the day that she goes through so that we're not hearing the same thing happening again and again and again. I really liked how it was done, and I think that was just very good writing on the part of the authors and such a smart thing to do. Our main character did a lot of growing throughout this period of getting things restarted again and again, and I just really like seeing that. I always love seeing good character development and good character growth, and I think the character brought that right away to me, and it was really nice to see. I also just love a book that goes around Christmas, that feels very Christmassy, that feels very sweet, and while there is a romance to this book because it is a Christina Lauren book, there is also a lot to do with family, a lot to do with friends, a lot to do with traditions and making new traditions. And I do think that Christmas books can sometimes fall too hard into only being focused on the romance. So it was nice to see the family feel and the family element coming into play here, as well as the character's own growth and then the romance. And I did really like the romance. I love a good friends to lovers, but it was also interesting to see how she figured things out for herself and then kind of worked on the romantic element alongside that. I thought it was a very good growth of the character growing, but also the romance growing and blossoming. I do think that the steamy scenes were done very well. There's only like one as far as I believe, and as far as steamy scenes go, it's on the tame side, but it was still a very good one. I was worried a bit because I do not like to listen to romance through my ears because I cringe, but I didn't cringe too much, so I think that shows just how well done it was. So if you're looking for something on the lighter side of steam, this is definitely one for you. And I do think it does a bit of the stereotypical thing that some romance books do, where the epilogue just goes a bit too far, a bit too soon, but who cares? By the end of it, I was feeling cheesy, I was feeling festive, and I was feeling happy, and I was just very satisfied, and I'm looking forward to reading more Christina Lauren books in the future. On the 1st of December, actually, I read This Winter by Alice Oseman. This is one of her novellas, and it is following some of the characters from Heartstopper, particularly Tori, Charlie, and their younger brother. But it follows those three characters. They all have a bit of a part in this novella, and it's talking about a Christmas day, which is a bit difficult because one of the characters is dealing with their eating disorder, so that means Christmas time is a bit difficult, and then Tori's just trying to be happy and have a good family time, and all of that's kind of woven into this novella. While I was reading it, I had major deja vu because I was like, this sounds so familiar, have I read this before? But actually I think this Christmas day is in either one of the Heartstopper graphics or it's mentioned in Solitaire, so it was just interesting seeing it from a different perspective as we get to see all of the characters' thoughts on what's happening. It's also written in prose, so that's another thing that's a bit different about this novella, and it's worth reading. It's cozy, it's nice, it does have its moment of difficulty even though it's very short, and I just think it's a nice addition to the Heartstopper world if you're into that kind of thing. I was also very happy to read more of Tori, as she is my favourite character. I love her to pieces and I love Solitaire. Then I I read Whiteout, which is by a wide array of authors. We have Dhonielle, Clayton, Tiffany D. Jackson, Nick Stone, Angie Thomas, Ashley Woodfolk and Nicola Yoon. And this is their novel, although it admittedly read more like a short story collection, it is their novel, and it's following our main character who did something wrong and needs to make an epic apology to their girlfriend by the deadline that the girlfriend has set. It's a bit of an ultimatum, and the person incorporates all the help of their friends to be able to do this. It did feel very much like a short story collection, which I was a bit disappointed in because I don't really read short story anthologies because some short stories are better than others and I don't tend to enjoy them as much, and this did say novel on it, so I really thought it was going to be a novel. But if you're going into this one, be aware that it's more of a short story collection. And while I had a good time reading it and it felt Christmassy and it felt snowy, I was reading this when it was snowing outside in London, so it felt very seasonal and apt. It just was okay. I think it did fall into what I said. Some short stories were better than others, but also it just felt a bit rushed. I feel like you could take each one of these short stories and it could have been a novel. You could have made each one its own book, and it tried to cram too much into a short story. These are not made to be short stories, and that's why there was a lot more telling versus showing, because the author had to tell us the history that these characters had with each other before it got into the present day romance that we were seeing, and it just felt a bit too jarring and a bit too much like you could have just written your own romantic novel. That said, there's a lot of representation in this. We get to see characters who are celebrating Eid, we get to see characters who are celebrating Christmas, characters who don't. We've got largely black characters but also Muslim characters and queer characters, so you're getting a wider range of stories, and that's really nice to see all wrapped up in one. I do think that it was a good time. It was a good time. Some of the romances are really sweet and I was like, oh, I like this couple together, and the ending really came together and felt heartwarming, so it definitely gives you those Christmassy vibes. So while it's not personally a favourite of mine, it was still a good enough time for me to enjoy reading it during this festive season. I then had the time of my life reading two middle grade novels. I read The Christmas Thesaurus and The Winter Witch and The Christmas Thesaurus and The Naughty List, and these are the two sequels to The Christmasaurus, which I read last year December. So I'm going to start with the second one, and this one we follow William Trundle again, our main character, and he goes back to the North Pole and sees Santa and hears about this winter witch, and this time he's got his family with him and a whole adventure happens, and it was so good. This was perfect. I had such a good time reading this. I read this in under 24 hours. I just absorbed it into my life, and it gave me Christmassy feelings and it gave me family, heartwarming vibes, and it was also such a good depiction of time travel, which is surprising. I did not expect time travel to come into this book, and I do think sometimes it can be hard to do well, but again, this one just took it, ran away with it, and did it in a very good job, in a way that I think children will be able to understand, but also a way that was complex enough to support the narrative and story and plot that it was creating. I think the illustrations in this are just fantastic. The illustrations are done by Shane DeVries, and the way that he draws smiles make me smile. Every time I see it, it makes me smile. That's how good they are. So the illustrations just add to this cozy story so much. In this one, we're following characters who are forming a family in different ways, and it's about accepting your family and welcoming people into your family, and it was just really nice to see that come into and be wrapped into the Christmas story and build throughout it. Again, as I've mentioned in this video just a couple minutes ago, I do love when family comes into a Christmas story, and I think I prefer it than romance, so it was kind of nice to see it in this. It was written very well. I do think the first, like, was it 50 to 100 pages felt like filler to me reading this as an adult. I do think children reading this are going to love those 100 pages, and it's very creative and it's very fun. So it's just me as an adult being like, the beginning could have been shortened down a bit, but truthfully, I'm not mad at it. I had such a good time. And so I went right on to read The Christmas Thesaurus and The Naughty List. This is the third and final book in the trilogy, and I have to say I was the most disappointed in this one. It wasn't a bad book by any means, it was fine, and I think children will again like this one, but for me as an adult reader, I was just a bit disappointed. So in this one, you follow the Christmas Thesaurus, and the Christmas Thesaurus is the main character, not William Trundle. And the Christmas Thesaurus sees that the naughty list is kind of outweighing the good list, so behind Santa's back, he goes to visit some of the children on the naughty list and tries to help them get onto the good list. That's kind of the plot of this story. So having a non-verbal dinosaur as the main character who needs to be the catalyst for change with the children just didn't quite work for me. Not that you can't have non-verbal main characters, but just that it meant that the children were changing their ways based on very little. And I don't know, it didn't quite hit the mark for me. It didn't quite be as effective as if the Christmasaurus and William Trundle went on the trip together and changed people's mind. It just didn't hit as much as I wanted it to. So I was a bit disappointed in that. It also is one of those books, again, that felt like a short story collection pieced together, and it just felt like filler in the series. Like I could take this book out of the series and the first 2 books would be fine, but they wanted to add one more and this is what we got. So it's like short stories of every child they visited changing their mind, and then it kind of all cobbles together by coming back to the Trundle family at the end just for a bit of a cameo. So it was a bit of a disappointment, but it was still fun, it was still creative, and I do think it had a few more moments where the author was shouting out his other books in a very noticeable way, so it felt more like, I've written a 3rd book, but these are the other books you should check out, and this one's not as good, but these are the other books you should check out. So it really missed the mark for me, I'm afraid. I also read The Holiday Trap by Roan Parrish. This is a Christmas romance book, but actually I should not say it's a Christmas romance book because it's also a Hanukkah, or as the character here calls it, a Chanukah romance book too. So we're following these 2 characters. One of them lives in one place and the other lives in another. One lives in a city, one lives in a small town, and things happen to them both that leaves them really wanting to escape the town and city they live in. For one person it has to do with a relationship, and for the other person it has to do with their family, and they've got a best friend connecting them, and the best friend suggests that they swap houses and do a house swap so that they get out of those environments. And so they do, and while they are out of those environments they each go on a personal development journey but also a romance journey. And I think this one did a very good job of balancing the romance element and again the character development. I'm being very impressed by how romances are doing that these days, because both of these characters had a lot of growing to do, and both of these characters had a lot of talking they needed to do to really be in healthy places, and you get to see them do that with lots of characters. And I almost feel like the romances took a back seat to the way each of these characters and also their love interests both had to develop to be prepared to even think about going into a healthy relationship. And so you're kind of getting 2 romances in one, and one of them doesn't even have the 3rd act breakup because it doesn't need to. So that was kind of nice to see and a bit refreshing as well. Both of these characters have passions that are near and dear to their heart, and I just love when characters have hobbies and passions that they're pursuing, even if it's not the main part of their job, just something they want to keep in their life. So it was lovely just hearing about what each of them really liked. Again, as I mentioned in the beginning, it was so nice to see Chanukah represented and have a Jewish main character. I learned a lot about the religion that I didn't know previously, and a lot about the culture that I didn't know previously, and it was just kind of nice to see that alongside a Christmas story, because I think we get a lot of Christmas romances, a lot of books all about Christmas, but of course that is not the only celebration going on in December. And while I did really enjoy this and have such a good time and feel all those warm fuzzy feelings that you want to at the end of a romance, I do think this one was a bit long. It could have been trimmed down by a good 100 pages, and just, yeah, it could have been trimmed down. There was a lot of things that I just didn't need to see. And in terms of the steamy scenes, there are some, but I do think they're quite tame, at least on my steamy range. So if you want something that's lightly steamy but it's not too heavy, then there's that. One of the relationships is a male-male relationship and the other is female-female, so it's all queer, and there's so many queer characters. It's fantastic to see and nice to see, and it was good that the secondary characters had a life of their own too. Okay, so I read Midnight in the Snow by Karen Swan, and I'm going to tell you some of the good things about it before I tell you why I hate this book. So what is this book about? This book is about a woman who is someone who does documentaries, so she especially goes and looks for insightful, really emotional, hard-hitting stories, and she does a documentary on someone, and because of what she said in that documentary, it makes somebody else public enemy number 1. And after a certain string of events happens, she goes to this public enemy number 1 and she says, my next documentary is going to tell his story. But of course, this person absolutely hates her because she has ruined his life, in his opinion. That's the premise of the story. The good things. The good things is that this is incredibly well written. I will admit I have personal bias against books that have this kind of cover that I see in the works, where the author has done loads and loads of books. They all kind of look the same and they're all there for about £2 or £3. I tend to have a little bit of personal bias against them. This has showed me that I shouldn't, because they can be written incredibly well. This is one of the few enemies to lovers romances where I believed it. I believed that they could go from enemies to lovers, and I was there like, how am I feeling these feelings? How am I convinced by the switch? I was convinced. I was fully convinced because it was written so well. Our main character is just so interesting and I really, really liked her. I loved the way that she was strong and independent, but she was also emotional and caring, and she could make mistakes and she would admit the mistakes that she's made and try to do her best to fix them. I just loved following this main character. And I really liked seeing her interact with her friends. And as far as plot goes, it kept throwing different things at me that I didn't expect. I read this very, very quickly. So all in all, I would say it was a very good book. And it made me interested in the kind of snowboarding competition. I'm not a snowboarder. I hate the snow, I hate the cold. So the fact that it could have me interested in it is something else. But, this book wins the prize for the fastest I've seen a disabled character commit suicide written by an able-bodied author. The fastest. It's not a spoiler to say this because it happens within the first 50 pages. I have talked about on this channel multiple times with a few different books how I am absolutely fed up of reading books by able-bodied authors where the disabled characters commit suicide, and that is the only purpose that they are there. It's belittling to disabled representation. I am fed up of it. I do not want to read it, and if I'd known this book had it, I would not have read it at all. I was just so gobsmacked that it was within the first 50 pages. That is the fastest I've ever seen it done. But what is worse is that this book, then everything that happens in this book could not have happened without that moment and that action committed by the disabled character. So the whole story is built off the back of this disabled character's actions. What is even worse is that we never ever get to hear that character's point of view. That character is like a footnote, so the whole book and the whole premise and the whole plot can be built off of them doing a stereotype that able-bodied authors love to write sometimes, and we never get to hear from himself. In fact, the way this character's career has blown up has something to do with this disabled character, and just the way that everything is built off the back of a disabled character who does not get a voice, who is doing a stereotypical thing that is what I think problematic. Representation it's a no from me. It's a hard and fast no. So no matter how much I can say this book is very well written and has convinced me of different things, it left me really confused after reading it because I was disgraced and disgusted by the representation, but then could see the merit of its writing. It left me in two minds, but like the next day I was like, actually I can't recommend this to anyone. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. So that's where I stand with this book. I think me and Karen Swan could have gotten on very well as writers if I'd started with another one of her stories, but as far as this actual book goes, I don't actually recommend it. So I started with the good things just in case it's something somebody else might want to read, regardless of my opinions of the other elements. But unfortunately, yeah, that's how I feel. Moving on, I read The Winter of Second Chances by Jenny Bayliss, and this was a really cute story. It's following a woman who catches her husband cheating, and she moves out and she decides she's gonna go her own way and try things herself. It was really, really nice. I really liked seeing a main character who's kind of in a romance book, in a Christmassy romance book. Actually not Christmassy, in a wintry romance book, because this happens in autumn to winter. Kind of going her own way. She's above 40 years old. So it's just nice to see older characters getting those romances, and I would love to see more of that in books and being pushed out, even to readers like me. I'm sure these books exist, but they don't get to be put on my radar. It was nice seeing this on my radar. Annie was a lovely, that is her name, right? Yes. Annie is a lovely main character. She was really sweet and she was really caring, and it was nice to see her stand up for herself more and more as the book progressed. The romance was really sweet. It's about her kind of moving to a small town and finding her own feet there, and it had all the lovely small town vibes. I really enjoyed the book club getting together, and I just liked seeing her come into her own. tone. I don't actually have too much to say about this one. If you're wondering, there are no steamy scenes at all, and it's just got the small town, romancy, older woman vibe. Yes, I read Christmas at Rosebend by Naima Simone. Can you tell that I'm on a spinny chair? I'm sorry. But yes, I read this one, and this was such a good romance. I really, really enjoyed it. So we're following our main character, and she has just gone through a grieving process. The person who she's believed is her dad for her whole life has just died, and in that process it means that she has become the guardian of her step-sister, who is much younger than her in age, who's basically a teenager. And she finds out that her father is not her biological father, so now she's curious about who her biological father is. She doesn't get along with her stepsister, but now she's her legal guardian, so she's trying to contend with that. And the dad who passed away has kind of set them up on a Christmas trip to Rosebend, which is the most Christmassy small town ever, full of Christmas traditions, and our main character does not like Christmas. So she's gone there with her stepsister, she's dealing with this parenting drama that she's kind of seeing herself through, she's dealing with this teenager who's plenty of drama she's trying to see herself through, and there she meets Wolf, who is just one of the people who live in the town. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I really like seeing a black main character in a romance. She has a side shave to her hair, which sometimes I mimic with my own hairstyles, and I just haven't seen a romance book with someone with that hairstyle before, so I was vibing. I also really, really liked, as I've mentioned, Christmas books that deal with family. I'm there, I'm here, I eat it all up, and I did in this case too. It was just nice to see her dealing with her unconventional situation in terms of trying to find her own father, but also really trying to connect with this teenager, and the storyline that went down on was just utterly sweet and very, very cute. In terms of the romance, I loved it. I love this romance so much. I really liked how Wolf, who is the male main character, also had things of his own to work through, that he had to process, his own grief that he had to lay to rest. And our main character, she had personal attributes she had to work through too, and it was just really nice to see that individual personal development. I thought seeing all of the Christmassy moments that the small town does was really sweet. It had some good secondary characters. This is actually a sequel to a romance series where they're all interconnected, and this is not the first one, so I could see some cameos and some harkening back to romances that have happened previously in the series before this one. I'm not a big fan of any pet name that's not Honey, which I'd consider to be a common thing to say. So Wolf sometimes calls her baby, and I was like, I hate this, and then by the end of the book I was like, I actually don't mind it. That's how much I really like the couple together. I did not mind the pet name. There are 2 chapters worth of steamy scenes, and they are pretty great. I was having a lovely time reading them, and I put them on medium level steam. So they're your usual steam level, and they're very good and very well written, and the ending was just so sweet and so heartwarming. I was just smiling and reading the last chapters. I will say again that it does the thing with the epilogue where it goes a step too far, a step too soon, but it's the romance genre. We forgive it. And then last but not least, I read Meet Me in London by Georgia Toffolo. This is, again, a Christmas romance. And this is one that I felt like it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. It was kind of small town, fake dating, billionaire romance vibes. It had all 3 of them in this book. Again, like the previous book I talked about, it's a sequel within a series where they're all interconnected, so you can read it as a standalone, but it does harken back to some of the characters, and it's not the first one in the series, I don't believe. So we follow our main character. She's really into fashion, she's really into design, and she recently broke up with a boyfriend because of something that she can't control, that he did not like. And then we're following Oliver. He is the son of an enterprise. He's been sent to this small town to kind of open this brand new department store because his cousin is making a big mess of it, and his mother is really choking down his throat to find a girlfriend. And what he decides to do is that on opening day he's going to introduce his parents to his fiancée, and he does not have a fiancée, so he's going to need to fake date someone. It was sweet, it was lovely, it was straightforward, it was nice. Is it the best thing I've ever read? No. Was it a very good Christmassy, wintry feeling book? Yes, I really like the two characters together. I think they suited each other, they helped each other grow and change while also letting them retain their independence in the relationship. It was nice to see the fake dating unravel. It was kind of funny seeing the fake dating billionaire small town mashup. It felt a bit much at times, but I also didn't mind it too badly. I do want to say that this has no steamy scenes whatsoever, so if you don't want that, then you won't get it in this book. Yeah, even though it was just very straightforward and very well done, it just was okay. I do think it did fall into the trap of all of the secondary characters were there just to support the main character. Even when she has conversations with her friends, it's never about them, it's just about her and her woes at the current moment. But I, again, didn't mind too much. It did the trick, it did the job, and it was a nice enough read. And there you have it. Those are all the books that I read in December. I'm looking forward to reading in 2023, and I hope there'll be a lot of great reads. But please let me know in the comments section down below what was the latest book that you've read and what did you think of it. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!